How are you doing? Not the Christianese, not the pad, oh, I'm blessed and highly favored and I'm fine. How are you seriously doing? We are living through shelter in place orders, living through COVID-19. How are you really doing with this? Are you okay? In the comment section, I want you to rate your okayness on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being you're really struggling, or 10, you're living your best life. So take a minute and put your number in the comment section below. Thank you.
Welcome to Empowering Your Thoughts, an outreach ministry of Christ International Church. On this program, we deal with mental health issues and how they intersect with our faith. Please comment, like, subscribe, and share this program with a friend. And your hosts for today's show and mental health advocates, Tabitha Perez, Valerie Taylor, and Nicole McKenzie.
Hi, I'm Tabitha.
Hi, I'm Valerie.
Hello, and I'm Nicole. So ladies, I just asked the audience what their numbers were. What are your numbers? How are y'all doing today?
I am at about a 6. Struggle is real. How about you, Tab?
I'm at about a 7. You know, I got some concerns, some worries, but of course I'm not letting it get me too low. How about you, Nicole?
I am at a 7 as well. You know, I've definitely seen harder times, but I'm also not quite living my best life just yet. So I would agree with you. And today's show is about how to be okay with not being okay. We are living in, like I said, just some really different, absolutely not our norm times. And it is okay for us not to be okay in this moment. I also want to be able to help you all have a pathway back to being okay.
So stick around. In just a few moments, we'll share 5 tips on how to get back to being okay.
And once again, be sure to like, comment down below, share, and on YouTube, subscribe, or on Facebook.
Thank you so much for sharing your input, and we will get more of your input in a little bit. So let's get into it. So in this time where we are sheltering in place, we have changes. We've become teachers in the home. We're our own tech department because we're working from home. And I would say we have probably not been okay at some point from March until now, and that is okay. I have spoken to a lot of different people throughout this whole time, and some of them, this pause has been a blessing. They have been praying for just a slowdown because their lives were becoming so overwhelming. Another friend of mine, she didn't even know that she needed the rest that we're now having. However, for others, it's been a complete nightmare. They've lost income. There's anxieties over their health, over their future, over just being able to get back to normal. And I think for us, if we're honest with ourselves, we vacillate somewhere in between those two thoughts. The image that comes to my mind is of the Disney cartoon Tangled, when Rapunzel has been freed from her tower. And there's a scene where she is, she shows those two different emotions, those extremes. And she's swinging on a swing saying, oh, best day ever. And then in the next scene, she's crying by a tree saying it's the worst day ever. I can definitely understand and relate. Like I said, this has been a 7 for me. So I've had this has been a good thing, and this has also not been a great thing as well. What parts of this situation have been helpful to you? Also, what parts have been a challenge? Feel free to leave your response in the comment section below, because we want to hear what and truly, again, how you are doing. So I want to be able to give, like I said earlier, a path to getting to okay and being okay with okay, and also getting on the other side of it. And the first step is to be honest with where you are. So often when we ask people how they're doing, they'll just automatically say, I'm fine. I know I'm guilty of that, even when I'm not. And this is something that Valerie brought up a few episodes ago, and I think it's something that we need to repeat and we need to hear again. In order to be okay, we need to first be honest about where we are. I think in images, and the images that come into my head is the "you are here" marker that's on the sign in the malls, and it says, and it lets you know where you are in relationship to where you want to go. In order to get to the Apple store, for example, you need to know where you are so that you know which direction that you need to move in. And in the same situation, in a situation like this, in order to get through tough emotional times, it is important for us to know exactly where we are so we know how to adjust ourselves in order to get through to the other side. The second step is to express our emotions in a healthy manner. We can take our cue from Jesus, and there were some times in his life where he was just not okay. And we can learn and glean from some of his examples. We see in Luke 13:31 through 35, he is grieving over Jerusalem. It doesn't say that he's crying in this particular passage, but it's noted that his heart is heavy. He is saddened as he is looking over Israel's spiritual and political capital, because they're about to do to him what they have been doing to prophets for centuries, rejecting him and even sometimes killing them, even though their purpose was to come and get them back on good footing with God. In Luke 19:41 through 47, as he is getting closer to Jerusalem, he is weeping again. He knows what is happening and what is going to happen to Jerusalem. He knows that in AD 66, when the Jews are beginning to rebel against Roman rule, that an emperor's son is going to come and begin the revolt against him. And he begins to crush the rebellion. And they fight back, and it takes another 3 years before the Romans actually take the city, and to the point that it is severely weakened, and it eventually is burned. In this attack, 6,000 Jews lose their lives. So Jesus is grieving something even before it actually happens. In John 11:35, we see again something that we talked about a few weeks ago, the death of Lazarus. Jesus is, when he finally arrives to where Mary and Martha are, he begins to weep when he sees Mary and the other mourners weeping. It also talks about his anger. So we are not sure whether he is angry because they're still doubting him and they're not just believing in who he says he is and who he's shown himself to be. Or in addition, he's also grieving with his friend Mary. You know, he had a very close relationship with Mary, Martha, and with Lazarus. And so their pain is now becoming his. So whichever reason it is, he still expressed his emotions in that moment. Even though Jesus is the one that we pattern our lives with, we see in these passages that he was not okay. These are all accounts of him crying and having emotional moments before he was brutally put to death. He was completely all God and all man. He knew coming in what the plan was and how he was going to redeem man, but he still allowed himself to be touched by the feelings of our infirmities, by our frailties. He showed us how to grieve, how to be upset, how to be angry, all without sin. He shows us that being a Christian does not exclude us from the vicissitudes of the human experience, that we have a pattern that if we follow it in him, that we can see how to stand on his promise and how we can allow it to be an anchor to guide us through as we are getting to being okay. I personally believe that we were not created to contain strong emotions. And tears is a typical outlet for our emotions. You know, obviously when there's a heartbreak, when there is a death, there's a loss, we cry. However, have you also been laughing so hard that you began to cry, or that you were so happy that you began to cry? I recently saw a video of a sister who surprised her older sister by visiting her for her birthday. And this older sister, when she saw her sister, she ran away, and the video is following her like, where did she go? And she was on her couch crying because she was so happy that her sister surprised her. Crying is one of the hundreds of coping skills that we have at our disposal. And if you email us at eyt@cicorlando.com, we will send you a packet of coping activities and strategies that you can use for yourself and with your kids. When I address the issue of managing emotions with my clients, adult and children, I often use the example of a pop. I'm from Ohio, so we say pop, not soda. And so if we are dying of thirst, but we just happen to drop our pop, and it's all bubbly and fizzy and everything like that, and we know what happens, it'll just explode if we just open it up. And I say, if you just needed that pop right in that moment, what would you do? Often they'll say they'll turn the cap really, really slowly. And that way it allows what's in it to come out slowly. And this is the same thing that we do with our emotions. Coping is like that. It is that opportunity for us to release the emotion in a safe, controlled, and healthy manner. The third step is to keep our focus. I mentioned a few weeks ago, we talked on how to focus on what is in our power, what's in our control. Even as a Christian, I will encourage you to focus on God and his promises. I am personally reminded of Peter and the disciples when they were on the boat in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the sea, and a storm arose. And in the middle of the night, Jesus came walking on the water. And Peter, who just anything that came in his head came out his mouth. And he says, Jesus, if that is you, bid me to come upon the water. And Jesus says, come. And so Peter is obedient and he steps out. But when he began to look more closely at the trouble, i.e. the wind, he began to get afraid. And Jesus, of course, does what he always does. He graciously saves him, as he does also for us. We can have peace even in the middle of a global pandemic. When we keep our hearts and our minds stayed on him, he gives us that peace that passes understanding. God can also keep us from drowning in our circumstances, can keep us from becoming overwhelmed when we are focused more on him than every news story, every new development, keeping ourselves grounded in who he is. And lastly, I would encourage you to create the habit of keeping a gratitude journal. There are so many times when God has come through for us in the clutch. When we were just about to go under, God came in and just snatched us up right on time. We can be like Peter. He had just hours prior to that situation saw Jesus perform a miracle by feeding 5,000 men. That's not including the women and children who were present that day, with just 5 loaves of bread and 3 fish. He's fed all of those people and had enough to have leftovers. But yet, when a new storm comes or a new novel wind blows, we go back to that place of wondering if God is going to come through for us. But the God that we serve is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Our trials and tribulations may change, but the God that we serve will not. When the children of Israel were being delivered from Egypt, God allowed the Red Sea to open up and for them to walk on dry ground. As they were walking on to the other side, they began to pick up stones. And these stones, they later used to tell the story of the miracle that God has done. When we have a gratitude journal, it is our collection of memory stones as well. These stones are something that we can go back and we can read when we are facing a challenging time, a diagnosis, or even a worldwide pandemic. So ladies, I've been talking for a while. Do want to get your feedback and your thoughts on this as well. But don't forget to stay tuned because we still have our 5 tips at the end.
That was so awesome, Nicole. Thank you so much for just giving us the really good information about how we see biblically how so many people were not okay and how we can really track this in the Bible. What I really want to hone in on are 2 things. The first is the very last thing you talked about is the gratitude journal. I think that's so important because you also talked about the people of Israel, or in our days, the Jewish people is what we would call them. And what they have yearly is they have many feasts, and one of them is the Passover feast. And essentially, the entirety of our Old Testament, or what they would call the Torah, is their gratitude journal. Yes, there are times when it talks about murmuring and it talks about complaining. It talks about times when they were not okay. But the thing that remains and the thing that is the gel for the Jewish community is the fact that God came through, is the fact that God will continue to come through because we saw him come through for us. They don't say for our ancestors and for those who came before us. They say, no, God brought us through the Red Sea. God brought us out of the land of Egypt. God made sure our firstborn were okay, were alive, as long as we put the blood on the door. So during this time, claim the miracles that happened in the lives of yourself and your family as your own. God did this for us. And all of you who've recovered from COVID-19 or know someone who has recovered from COVID-19, let this stand as a personal miracle to say God does miracles,
Right.
and he is able to do the exceeding and the abundant. And this is my gratitude journal. This person was delivered today. This person was healed today. Don't just keep track of all those that passed on from this thing, but this person who was gravely ill came back from the essentially the grave and was able to be recovered. But so the bigger picture about life, but also the smaller pictures about today, I was able to buy what I needed to buy.
Right.
So the gratitude journal is going to be really important. And then that second point is just that it's not weakness to not be okay. It's really not. I think sometimes we have the wrong understanding about faith and how faith is supposed to edit our emotions when that's not really a thing. Faith,
Right.
it helps us to move forward. It helps us to trust in God, but the emotions will always exist. And to not be okay is not a loss in faith in God. It's a path to get to God, essentially. I can't be healed unless I know what I'm battling, unless I know what the illness is. So not being okay is just a place on the road, and don't be afraid to not be okay. And I really love that about this lesson. Thanks. Valerie, how about you?
So I was thinking of 2 things while the both of you ladies were speaking. The first thing is to understand that we are going through a collective trauma right now. So that is why we are experiencing maybe a roller coaster of emotions. We're grieving, right? As we've spoken before, we may be anxious or fearful. Things may be changing in our family. We're experiencing losses. So it's understandable if you don't feel okay. The world has changed in the blink of an eye, and no one expects us to just come out tomorrow and say, everything is perfect and we're great. That's not how it works. So just understand where you are at this moment. And I think that plays true to what Nicole was mentioning earlier, about being able to just deal with your emotions and processing them the right way. The second thing is, I understand with all this loss and this change of routine and everything that we are experiencing difficulty understanding where to go and finding meaning right now, right? We are a production-based society, so the more I do for you, the more that I'm valuable. And so when that is ripped away, now what? So my challenge for you would be to understand it's not just what we do for ourselves, for our families, for the community, for our jobs. It's also who we are. So take the time to just be you and remove all the roles and just feel and process those emotions. That's all I have for you. Nicole?
All right. Thank you so much, ladies, for your input. And so now we are at the tips. Yes. All right. So the first tip is acknowledge where you are. Be honest about what you're feeling. again, we've said it throughout the show, it is okay not to be okay. As Tabitha so graciously and eloquently expressed it, it is our pathway to get to God. We need to know where we are, where we're lacking, in order to know where we need to go. So admit that you're okay. Acknowledge it. It's all right. It's not a moral failing. It's not a lack of faith. Name and process your feelings.
Number 2, let it out. Can you tell us about that one, Nicole?
Use a coping skill. Use a strategy. Release that emotion in a healthy manner. Like I shared in an example, we don't want to explode all over everyone because right now we're all being shaken. So we want to be able to use a coping strategy to slowly release some of the angst that we have going on. And again, if you want that packet for free, to email us and we will get that right out to you.
Tip number 3, be kind to yourself and others. What do you think, Nicole?
We are all at a lot of different varying levels of okayness with this virus. You do not have to be productive all 28 hours of the day. And I know there's only 24, but sometimes, again, we are such a productive-based society where we want to be human beings or doings instead of human beings. So it's okay in this moment just to be a human being. Just getting up and getting through the day sometimes is enough, and that may be all that you have in you for that day, and it is okay. So be kind, and if what you have is just your at-home work and you're homeschooling your children, and then you just want to take a nap and you're able to do so, go for it. Be kind to yourself during this time, especially.
Number 4, create a gratitude journal. Can you tell us about that one?
We have talked a lot about gratitude and just how important it is. We want to record the good things that have happened now so that in the future, when we come into a rough patch, we can look and recall the record of God and how faithful he has been. And it can be in our own handwriting, in our own style of communication. So important so that we will know that God truly doesn't change, that he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Our issues, our challenges may change, but the God we serve does not.
That's right. And tip number 5 is say no. Can you explain, Nicole?
Saying no is so important to have boundaries and protections of ourselves at this time. It is okay to say no to everything, even if just when we get back to normal, to say okay or no to anything that does not benefit your emotional or your mental health. It is okay to say no to anything that is taxing on you, drain on your reserves. It is okay, and it's fine. And so actually today we have an extra one that goes along with saying no, and it is to say yes. So just as we want to say no to things that are not beneficial, we also want to say yes to those things and those peoples and those opportunities that enhance and will nurture our emotional and mental health, and are the things that you really want to do. So we also want to say yes as well.
Yes, so next week we have a Q&A episode. So what's going to happen is the questions that you have sent us down in these comments below. So send your questions. Also that you have emailed us at eyt@cscorlando.org. We're going to be compiling those questions if they're not private, and we're going to be answering them on next week's episode. So please come back and see us. This has been Empowering Your Thoughts, and this is us signing out.